you know, there's a need to put an end to that. Whenever I talk with people about this, and usually I haven't been doing this since I've been vice president or in the last 4 years as much as I used to speak on this issue. But I used to, for the first 10 years, spend a lot of time going to basically male audiences talking about this issue. And one of the things I most often hear from men is, well, why didn't you just leave? Why not just leave? Well, or why didn't she strike back? Well, you know, guys, all the men in the audience, you know, how many times when you were a kid in the schoolyard, on a playing field, did the bully, the guy 25 pounds heavier than you, have you on the ground? You had a clear look at his face. And how many times did my case, my mother, and your case, maybe your father, tell, all you got to do is pop him in the nose. Hit him square in the nose. He'll bleed and he'll give up. How many of you badass guys did that? Raise your hand. I don't know a lot who did it. So what do you think? Cop comes up. A woman your director size is standing next to her. She's bleeding. I'm standing next to her. The cop says, ma'am, do you want to bring charges? No, and I'm going to be out in 2 hours. How many of you tough guys bring the charges? How many of you men out there saw the movie Deliverance? Raise your hand. You all remember the same scene, don't you? Women, they'll explain it to you later. There's one scene where one of the tough guys gets dragged into the woods and two self-proclaimed hillbillies tie him to a tree and rape him. Let me ask you guys, how many of you guys come out of those woods and go report what just happened to you? Seriously. Most guys say, I go back and get my gun, man. I go back and get him. Why don't you report it? Because you're ashamed. Ashamed. Embarrassed. You don't want your friends to know a man raped you. How about women in our society? How easy do you think it is for a woman to go home and say, I've been raped? Knowing in a rape case is almost always he said, she said. We've got to change our attitudes. Just as men would not want to deal with the exposure, the sense of shame, the sense of guilt that society imposes, well, women don't either. So we set out to do something more than just penalize men and provide shelter for women. We set out, we got a long way to go to change those three impediments in our culture. Blame the victim, it's a family affair, and why didn't she? No longer is this a family affair. No longer should a woman be ashamed of reporting the hideous crimes against them. And to a large degree, together with the people like you, we've succeeded in taking away some of those taboos. That's why so many more women are reporting crimes. And each and every day, with the help of your help, we help Americans break the silence. And I'm proud that VAWA has helped you all who provide those services along the way. Since 1994, VAWA has spent $4 billion sending it to states and local communities to improve the nation's response to domestic violence and sexual assault. In addition to the funding, VAWA brought people together, victims advocates, prosecutors, law enforcement officers, judges. I met 2 of your judges today. Fact of the matter is, judges now know that it matters a great deal that when they have a woman about to testify against a man in a court, to not have them both sitting in the same anteroom before they walk into that courtroom. My son's the Attorney General of Delaware. He's continued a tradition after this act had passed of making sure his prosecutors interpose their body between the witness and the victim because they know of the threatening stares. And don't think women don't read every day that there's about 10% of these guys that never stop, no matter whether they're convicted or not. Corporations have stepped up. I don't want to single out Verizon is one that comes to mind here, but many of your corporations, our corporations have stepped up. Among the first employers to step out and develop policies in the early 90s were Polaroid, Liz Claiborne, Levi Strauss, and Marshalls. Because it used to be when a woman would walk in and have a black eye and be reported, and her supervisor said, "What happened?" She said, "I ran into the door jamb." Because she knew if she reported that she'd been abused by her husband and they've seen it before, the last thing they want is trouble on the floor, man. We don't want your husband coming in here, man. We don't want that to happen. It's not our responsibility. I met a doctor who's on your board here. He can tell you, still today, close to 70% of all the women who show up in an emergency room with a broken bone or a cut, bleeding, it's usually at the hand of a man, as a consequence of a man's fist. So now docs are training to make sure. In my state, I made sure that there are literally advocates at every emergency ward. So when a woman walks in and obviously is victimized, there's someone there to say, "Look, we can take you home. We can get this particular cop, we can get a stay-away order right away for you. We can help." And corporations today, 70 corporations are part of the Corporate Alliance to End Partner Abuse. It's a big change, a significant positive change. We've set up a national hotline that now has answered more than 2 million crisis calls and continues to field more than 21,000 calls a month. Do you guys have any idea how hard it is for the woman to go in the corner or go to a payphone and say, I'm calling you from, what's the address, dear? Well, my husband. Oh my God, I see him come up the driveway. Oh my God. How hard that is to pick that phone up? How much courage it takes? Well, police and courts now are understanding it a whole lot better. And they're acting proactively like your courts are. Folks, this is a big problem, but there's a lot of progress has been made. More victims are coming forward because they know you're there. They know the courts are not going to retry them. They know the police are not going to ask them, "What were you wearing?" They know the cops aren't going to ask inappropriate questions. A young woman I went to school with, I dated her sister, a wonderful family, got me after Mass 8 years ago and said a local cop asked when her daughter had been raped, had she had any physical sensation from it. This is about educating the whole society. But there's been progress. But I've always said that once we got to the White House, we would step it up even more. And the problem's still with us. Today, domestic violence causes 2 million injuries and more than 1,400 deaths to women every single year in America. And in tough economic times, it becomes harder and harder for victims to escape the violence. So your services are especially critical in these times. But at the same time, many state budgets, almost every state budget, is being slashed. Resources are scarce, and programs like yours tend to fall off the plate. So we had a problem that the demand is rising the last 2 years while the availability of the services is shrinking because of budgets. But I want to tell you the commitment Barack Obama and I have made, notwithstanding how difficult, with the help of Dick and some of our friends in the House and Senate, notwithstanding the budget deficits, we believe there's nothing that is more important. Our 2011 budget actually includes a record $730 million to address domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, $130 million.